I can't answer that easily. I was a very bad writer at that point in my life. I had no idea what I was doing at all. I picked the worst title in the world, and John knows this. I got letters from the author of The Water is Wine. But my favorite was The Water is Wet. So I'm like, and usually, and you'll hear this a million times in Savannah, you're going to hear people say, I love your book, How Wide is My River? And no one ever gets it right. So one of the things The Water is Wide taught me about is the naming of things is so important. But I really was terrified. I'd been fired from the job. I had 3 kids living with me, 3 kids from Daufuskie Island living with me. I'd been drafted, and I was in over my head. And that's what I knew from that point, and I had no idea how to get a book published. None. This, I believe, it was tough entering the publishing industry 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't know how people are doing it or figuring it out today. The book itself seems in jeopardy to me. And I never thought I'd live to see that. I never thought I'd live to be in a time where if I really wanted to write a hot book, I would write about vampires. I'd write about zombies. We have one of our best friends from the Citadel who told us yesterday his son's working on a movie in Savannah. And I said, what's the movie? And he said, Abraham Lincoln and zombies. I thought, yeah, am I going to survive the times I'm living in that? I don't know if I could do it. But it's much more complicated now. There's much more, the e-book has changed the industry, terrified the industry, and I don't know how long the industry is going to be able to remain with these downturn of sales. But it will be fascinating to watch and see John is publishing in this now. I don't know what he's doing to get these books published. It makes no sense to me at all. But as I told John yesterday, I can't even cut on my computer. And my wife has to do that. And I can't type. So it's, I'm about 20 revolutions behind. When I missed the typewriter, it really hurt me. But I still write by hand, and I've been doing that since I was at Citadel. Well, when John Voight played me in Conroy, I went around for a year feeling ugly. And it was so bizarre seeing somebody walking around a screen saying he's me. And I used to go around to talk to teachers after they watched the movie. And I always loved it when John and Wayne, the last scene is very, it's very stirring and moving. And, John always got this beautiful chiseled head. And so he would flip off. The end would come, the lights would go up, and then I would stand up and rise like a toad from the audience. And there'd be a gasp of horror from these, a lot of them were lady teachers, just, but the difference between me and John Voight. So the movies have changed my life, though. They've changed, my family's life.
Well, let me talk about that for a minute. First of all, I want to say something about Pat. Pat, of all the people I've ever known, would be the last person that you would have a falling out with in your friendship because of a view honestly held. If it was honestly held, I don't think it would make any difference how widely it varied from Pat's view. We argued about Vietnam, we argued about Shannon Faulkner, we argued about a lot of things, and I don't think it's ever affected our personal relationship, and I think that's a tribute more to Pat than anything else, because he actually values that in people, and as long as the belief is honestly held, I think, and intellectually defensible.
John thought I was a communist when he met me at the Citadel. And it began our lifelong dialogue.
No, I thought you were a liberal. My parents thought you were a communist.
Yes. I think they told me that too.
They told me that early and often.
his parents had trouble with me. But I say it was John's fault. When he introduced them to me, he says, Mom and Dad, this is Pat Conroy, the guy I've been talking about. He's the only one I've ever met who actually believes in integration. And they started screaming at me. And, this was, and I had come to love John, so I just, had to take the barrage.
You could not have alarmed my parents more if you'd have come into the house and said you believed in incest.
I know.
I mean, it was just, not something they were keen on. Let's put it that way.
I was raised in the South, so I had encountered this before. It was, teachers were so important to me. They may have been the most important thing when I was a kid. And since I was getting beat up at home, and then, of course, my first 9 years or something, I went to Catholic school, so I was being beaten up in school. I had, huge 300-pound nuns teaching me. And, they had the personalities of Rottweilers as they patrolled the aisles between the children. Then I came to Beaufort High School. And it was the first time I'd not been taught in Catholic school. And it was like a revelation to me. Is when I walked in the thing, I stood by my desk, and I was waiting to say the morning prayers. And I just done that my whole life. And Gene Norris looks at me, he comes in, and he says, "What's he doing, boy? Sit down." He throws me. Well, then I see the chaos of public schools. Complete and utter, you didn't do that in Catholic school. And I'm thinking, boy, these kids are going to get killed. And I had this love of my life, this teacher who was gentle, kind, loved literature, seemed to like me. And it was so wonderful to me. In Beaufort High School, I loved all my teachers. And I loved the principal, Bill Duffer, and I loved all these, and they seemed to be helping, helping it. And they would tell me things like, you need to make your school proud of, you. And I thought, what an interesting idea, make my school proud. And so they had a great influence. And then I went to the Citadel, where John and I, in our class, we had 5 guys that majored in English. It was a natural admission that you were gay to the rest of the Corps of Cadets. I didn't know this, but I found out very swiftly that that's where you relocate. But I've told John, my English teachers were fabulous. My literature teachers, I couldn't wait to get to class. My history teachers could not have been better. And so I thought I got a terrific education at the Citadel. And the Beaufort High School is some of the happiest days of my life. So I treasure the memories of my teachers. I write about them frequently. And it's all through my books. When I was traveling with my reading life, I always ask, what these people, what do you do? How'd you get to Savannah? That kind of stuff. And, I wanted it to be a personal encounter. And when I was traveling with that book, and I was talking to teachers, I said, how's it going teaching? He said, 5 people cried. They just cried. They were so frustrated. There was such pressure on them. And it's these stupid tests. It's these Dumbo tests. And everybody involved, from President Bush to President Obama to, it's all out of the Ivy League, where testing is more important than anything. And that achievement is more important than anything. Let me test those 18 kids. I tested them. Told John this yesterday. I had to test them. So I found out they all read below the first grade level. And I realized I humiliated them. So I said, let's take it again. So what I did was say, I'm going to tell you the answers. And then all year we're going to work on why that's the right answer. And it'll help you. But you need to get this right. So I gave them the thing. Okay, now memorize the answers. They did. They all read above the 8th grade level. They did great. And I told them, I said, kids, we got some problems. And that was the same day I'd ask them, what ocean washes up on Dufusky Island? What's the largest city in the world? Savannah, Georgia. Second largest, Bluffton, South Carolina. And although Bluffton is coming in its own, and I said, okay, we got some problems we work on. And I said, kids, you got the right guy. I can do this. And we developed very quickly. And those kids did some extraordinary things that year. And they continue to do so. I don't know if you all know Sally Ann Robinson. She wrote cookbooks, the Gullah cookbooks. And she was a sixth grader when I went over there. And I ended up taking them to Washington, D.C. because they'd never heard of Washington, D.C. And John read this last night. Sally Ann emailed me. He said, Mr. Conroy, I have not been back to Washington, D.C. since you took us up here when I was on Dufusky. And we remember the thing you loved the most was the Smithsonian Institute, when you scared us with the elephant by telling us he was alive. Why ain't he moving? I said, just rest. So we all remember that. You showed us a hope time, and you said, hey, she said, last night, I want you to know, I spoke and signed books at the Smithsonian Institute. And what a great day in my life. She said, and my line was huge.
Call yourself a writer at that point?
No.
When did you feel like you knew what you were doing as a writer?
After the Lords of Discipline.
So a couple more books down the line.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
I always thought I was a fraud. I think this is very common with writers. Mm-hmm. I always thought I was a complete and utter fraud. I was fooling somebody. But when I was writing the Lords of Discipline, I felt it come together.
kind of your process and
it just seemed like the writing was good. It was clear and sharp. And the Citadel, the subject matter, I've written about the Citadel more than any writer in history. And it's always been interesting to me. Fame is not good for anybody, ever. And I believe that. John is sitting there not believing.
I don't have to worry about it.
at the second, but
Well, before today, I have to worry about it. Now, of course, it'll be moved to the top of my worry list in the morning.
the second they tell you you'll never have to worry about money again, all of a sudden you worry about money every moment.
And I got published too early. I was one of the first in my generation to be published. That means every other person in my generation hated my guts. But I think it also skews you about yourself. You get swell-headed. I just don't think it's good, especially when it comes young. I don't see how these young actors and stuff do it.
Most of them don't.
I mean, I just do not understand it.
I think my observation is it's taken a certain toll on you, but I also have to say that you are the same guy I remember from the Citadel. I mean, we met when we were 19 years old, and Pat has essentially not changed fundamentally in all that time. And I worried about that. I saw his, after seeing the Water is Wide come out, and then followed by the Lords of Discipline, and then of course once the Prince of Tides hit, and Barbara Streisand got involved with the movie and all of that, Pat was really, in the upper echelons, and I worried that it would change him as a person. And I was very relieved to find out. And we had a gap of a number of years. Mm-hmm. You lived in Rome, and we had a gap of a number of years where we didn't see each other or talk to each other. And I worried that the guy that I knew in college was no longer there. And I have to say, I think he's handled that part of it very well. And if you want to see Pat get irritated, put him around somebody who is famous, whose fame has gone to their head. And he does not suffer those fools very gladly, in my experience. So I think he's the same guy, but I do think it's probably taken a toll, and I don't see how it cannot take a toll. You know, just the volume of as every writer knows, Pat is a willing and generous blurber. You know, and everybody would love to have a Pat Conroy blurb on their book. Well, if you go into the other room, you'll find stacks of books and manuscripts waiting to be read so he can blurb them. Well, that's outside of his duties as a husband, as a writer, as a guy who wants some time off. But he does it, and he reads through them, and he doesn't blurb things he hasn't read. Just that is enough work to choke a horse.
My God, Barbara Streisand called me up one day, and you know I can't pretend this ain't a big day in my life.
Yeah.
You know, I just cannot do it. So she calls me up and she says, "Pat, I want you to come up to New York for 2 weeks and let's work on a final draft." So I said, good. I hung up the phone. I said, God, it's just because you know that's like meeting the Statue of Liberty. You know, this is fame like I have not. So my father takes me to the Atlanta airport. As he puts me on, I'm getting out of the car and Dad says, "Hey son, I hear she eats writers alive." So I said, "Thanks, Pops." And I said, "It has been so grand, your contribution to my career." So when I went up to Barbara Streisand's very nice apartment, she answered the door and she's a small woman, which I didn't realize. I thought she was going to be tall. And I said,
Statue of Liberty's tall.
yes, I said, "Miss Streisand, I want to tell you what my father said." And I told her, it enraged her. And she said, "How long has your father known me?" I said, "That's a good answer." And I liked it, but I want to promise you, if you yell at me, hurt my feelings, or make me cry, I'm going to quit writing novels and only write about you and my hatred of you for the rest of my life. I will mock you. And so I went in, we had a ball together.